friends, welcome to this symposium on team teaching online with cases. I am Sivakumar and I have with me Vijaya and Devapratim, two of my friends, and the three of us together will be discussing about how to team teach cases online. Before we start off with this discussion, I would like to introduce myself before I introduce my friends here who are part of this panel. My name is Sivakumar and I have about 25 years of experience in business school teaching, research, consulting, and executive education. After my PhD, I did my postdoctoral work at Technology University Delft in Netherlands. And I also taught briefly once at Oakland University, USA. In India, I have taught at IIM Bangalore and IIM Vizag, and also at the National Institute of Agriculture Marketing, Jaipur. Two of my cases, one co-authored, has won prizes in the ISB IV case competition. I am also involved as a volunteer with AACSB. I have written a book on retailing, and some of my research has appeared in the Journal of Nonprofit and Public Sector Marketing. I have two illustrious friends of mine joining me in this panel discussion. The first one is Professor Vijaya. Vijaya is an associate professor in the University of Denver. She is the past president of the North American Case Research Association and the former chair with the Strategic Management Society teaching community. She is a gold medalist from India and she has received awards for her case research, reviewing, teaching and service. Last year, she got the prestigious Outstanding Contribution to the Case Method Award from the Case Center UK. She has also received awards for her case research from prestigious organizations like Academy of Management, NACRA, and the ICOS Foundation. She has co-edited a scholarly book on sustainability, social responsibility, and innovation in the hospitality industry, and published articles and numerous case studies on corporate governance, global strategy, sustainability, and entrepreneurship. She is on the editorial review board of 4 leading case journals, including Case Research Journal. She is currently the co-chair of NACRA's Corporate Governance and Ethics track and a junior chair of the Strategy Teaching Professional Development Workshop Committee for the 2021 Academy of Management Conference. Welcome, Vijaya, to this symposium. I have another illustrious friend of mine who is joining me in this symposium. He is Devapratim Purkayastha. Professor Devapratim is a professor of strategy in ICFI Business School in India, based in Hyderabad, India. He is the director of its Case Research Center. He has more than 20 years of experience in teaching research at ICFI Business School. He is the consulting editor of Casefolio. It's a journal that publishes cases from ICFI Business School. He is also editorial board member for Case Research Journal NACRA and the editorial advisory board of Case Journal and Case Focus. He is an internationally renowned case expert. He has won numerous case method awards, including the prestigious Outstanding Contribution to the Case Method Award from the Executive Committee of Case Center. In addition to featuring in the list of all-time best-selling authors of case studies written over the past 4 decades, Professor Purkayastha was declared as the Case Center's #1 best-selling author of management case studies every year since 2016. He has won multiple case method awards and recognition from AOM, AMBA, CMAN, EFMD, etc. So welcome both of you to this symposium. So with this introduction, let's get on to understanding of what is team teaching. Here are a few ingredients that we need to look at when we are talking of team teaching. Team teaching obviously means that we have two or more faculty members who are involved at the same time in the same classroom teaching the same case. Now, online, this would mean that we are talking of synchronously two or more faculty members in probably different parts of the same country or different parts of the world online remotely handling a case discussion. Right now, if we understand this situation in terms of how a case is going to be taught online, and with the help of coordination between the different faculty who are going to be involved in teaching the same case, what it involves is understanding the course logistics quite well. Operationally, how is it that this kind of a case discussion is going to happen online with the help of students, again, who may be in different parts of the world. So the faculty probably is also located in different parts of the world. The students are also from different parts of the world. And how is it that the whole thing is going to be coordinated? Now, this involves a good amount of planning, a great amount of work in terms of understanding the pedagogy. How is it that the whole case discussion is going to go on, and how case pedagogy is going to be managed in this kind of a setting, and also about how assessment of the whole thing is going to happen. So together, this concept of team teaching online, a case would mean understanding, planning, pedagogy, and assessment together in running a course where such a arrangement is going to be thought of. Now, let me invite Vijaya to give her perspective about how one would like to teach a case, team teach a case online, and what are the kinds of issues that one would have to consider, or the aspects that one would have to consider while team teaching online. Over to Vijay.
Thank you, Shiv. That was a great introduction, and welcome again. Yes, this is actually a very interesting mode of delivery, one of my favorites that, of course, I've not done in a long time. However, some of the important things that, as has been mentioned by Shiv here, is, of course, the delivery modes, but then there are other things that need to be considered, such as selecting the right cases. We all know, and we have written, 20-page long cases, 25-page long cases, but today's world, the students don't want to read that much. But then again, in an online environment, what would be the right case to be used? And that is one of my friends here and colleagues would be discussing that. Definitely, how do we engage students? Without engaging them, we would have a very weak outcome. And you also know in online environments, most of you have already taught online classes, but then engaging students in a discussion, a lively discussion that is paramount for case teaching is one of the most interesting challenges that we will all encounter. So we will share a few experiences and pointers on that. And then the last item, assessment. How do we assess participation? So we will include all of these.
Thanks, Vijaya. Now let me talk about what are the benefits that one would look at when one is doing team teaching. Now, team teaching means that there are multiple faculty members teaching the same case for the same set of students. Now, if there is one faculty member who is teaching a case, that brings in only one perspective. So there are two faculty members, and the two faculty members come from multiple, different kind of disciplines. It brings in different perspectives to the students, and therefore there is greater active faculty and student involvement. What's also important here is that if we have two or more faculty members handling an entire course which deals with a lot of cases that are going to be team taught. It also helps in sharing the organization and delivery of the cases as well as evaluation, because it means there are multiple faculty members who will share this responsibility. What this also would help is in terms of bettering student engagement. The reason it's going to increase student engagement is that for the same case, the student can now look at how faculty with multidisciplinary perspective on a case can bring in richness in looking at decision making in a case. The next aspect, which I think will be promoted through a team teaching environment online for a case, is the variety in case instruction options that are possible. Sometime as part of this symposium, we are going to discuss about what are the various kind of case instruction options that are available, and therefore how is it that very effectively we can use these different instructional methods depending upon the convenience with which the faculty can look at these case instruction methods, the faculty that are going to be involved in team teaching. That's also something that we are going to look at. So that's one other benefit of team teaching a case online. And the best part is that while we kind of almost advise all students to develop their collaboration skills as part of an MBA program, how is it that the faculty can demonstrate collaboration skills? Team teaching a course or a case online, in this case, is a classic example of exhibiting and enhancing the collaboration skills that may happen among the faculty members, and is also a way of now therefore demonstrating to the students as to how faculty can collaborate very effectively with regard to teaching. And what is going to happen as a result of this is that there is, demonstration as well as the impact of this ability to collaborate, that's going to make a difference among the students in terms of what we are looking at as benefits because of team teaching a case online. Now, let me invite my friend Dave to talk about further benefits that one can look at when we are involved in a team teaching context online for a case.
Thanks, Shiv, and hi, bye, and hello to everyone. So, taking the discussion further about the benefits of team teaching with cases. Team teaching with cases has so many other benefits as well. Some of it is, I would like to build on some of the things that Shiv has said, plus some more points like, this shows team effort. So this is all about team effort, and it's in the true spirit of the case method, in the sense that we always talk about two heads being better than one, more the merrier, and that's what we hear about the case method, and that's what we built on. Those are the main benefits of the case method, because one learns from the other, new perspectives are come in, and this same can also happen with two instructors or even two or more instructors coming into the picture. Now, what this does for the students is that there is something novel about it. So that novelty is also crucial or instrumental in driving engagement, because students can see that there are two instructors, which is not the usual things they are used to seeing. So that itself brings in some novelty into the class, and if orchestrated well, if implemented well, this can really drive engagement and take the class participation to a different level. At the same time, when you have different instructors coming in, two or more, you can bring in a lot of alternative perspectives, that can be driven by the instructors, even if it is not coming from the participants. So this is also very good for interdisciplinary mode of teaching, where, because the case is nothing but a but how you capture the real world and bring it to the classroom. So it may not be fitting into those narrow compartmentalized disciplines. So if you want to do it in an interdisciplinary fashion, if you want to teach the situations, there is no better way than to have different teachers, different instructors coming in, and they can drive it in a really holistic manner. Because one of the issues that have come up in management education, rather a bane of management education today, is that there is a more specialized, compartmentalized, narrow view of disciplines as opposed to more holistic learning. So this team teaching with people from instructors from different disciplines coming in to teach the same case can lead to more holistic education and learning. At the same time, this can also be a very good opportunity for newer instructors to learn the tricks of the trade. So, of course, there can always be two equally adept teachers coming in and bringing everything together and doing it very well in an interdisciplinary manner. But you can also look at other way, where there is one person who is less experienced. That instructor can learn so much more, and even it can also be the other way around. That new instructor can also bring in newer ways of teaching or newer knowledge or insights, which can be a very good learning opportunity for the more experienced teacher. So one can build on each other's strengths. And when we talk about synchronous, we can also look at what benefits it can bring in the asynchronous mode. Because this is where you can really benefit from scale. Because the best teachers can be brought together. Even if they are spatially separated, you can bring them together. You can even think of options like combining sections. Instead of having just one section with, say, 50 students, you can even bring in 4 sections together and 4 instructors who can take their turns, or even together they can bring in the insights and drive the engagement and the discussion in the asynchronous mode. And of course, there are so many benefits that can come in the evaluation of the class also, but more about that later, because I'm sure everyone has things to say about that. So can we go ahead, Shiv? Okay.
What do you think are the challenges and constraints when you're trying to look at, managing team teaching online?
Yeah, many of these benefits that we talked about can also turn into some challenges and constraints as well for the faculty members, for the instructors who are going for team teaching. Like this is one adage that we hear so much about, that too many cooks spoil the broth. Though this is very, very much opposed to what the case method is all about, but we all know where things can go terribly wrong when more people are involved. Like good intentions are not always enough, because both the instructors can have very good intentions of driving the case objectives in the class, but sometimes if it is not well coordinated, not well orchestrated, not well planned, then things can go terribly wrong. Like even in the case of, if you give the simile of the too many cooks spoiling the broth, both very good chefs but uncoordinated, both goes and gives the same amount of salt into that broth, it can spoil the broth. So good intentions apart, even that things can go wrong in so many other ways, like if there is a clash of personality, and that can happen. You don't want 2 power centers coming up in the same class. Whether you want it or not, participants look at you as a power center most of the time, and no matter how much you want to make it informal, that is always an issue. And when there are 2 power centers, this can really make matters worse if not taken care of. And collaboration, we have talked about collaboration because team teaching banks on collaboration. But if you look at, we teach collaboration, we are good at teaching collaboration, but many a times we are not very good at implementing and, practicing collaboration ourselves. I have seen it happening with so many people. I have at times been at fault. So, this does not come very naturally to everyone. So then, there can be conflicting priorities, there can be conflicting objectives. There is a finance instructor and there is a operations instructor or a marketing instructor, and each one may be still thinking very narrowly about their disciplines. So what do you do in such a situation? So things can go wrong there, and sometimes it can confuse students, particularly when there is some undercurrent, some clash, some conflicts between the instructors and how they are driving the class. This can confuse students, and sometimes things are not very obvious to us, but it's very obvious to the other people who are beholding the whole thing. And we are talking about giving mixed signals there in the classroom. And why mixed signals? It can be very conflicting signals, very conflicting communications, which is never good for the class. So these are things that we have to see how we can avoid this, because these are very real. Anyone teaching this in the team mode or in the online mode as teams can very well understand that these things can happen, things can go wrong. But how is it that we can avoid those?
Now we are at a stage where we need to get to understand if any of the faculty member is interested in team teaching cases online, what are the kinds of steps that one would have to follow? And if you are trying to look at the steps that are involved in trying to prepare oneself for case teaching online in a team of faculty members, then the first step would be what we call as co-planning. So what is co-planning? Co-planning actually means that we are going to work as a faculty team, and this team has to actually work towards how the different cases are going to be used when we are trying to look at team teaching them online. Now, this requires some amount of planning on the part of the team, in the sense that all the members in the team should speak as one voice with regard to how finally the whole case is going to be taught. As we see in any team development, obviously the team of faculty members who are going to be team teaching would go through these stages, that is forming, storming, norming and performing, which is typically the team development cycle that any team goes through in any other context. What this would mean is that while there will be volunteers for among the faculty for team teaching, there would also be differences that might crop up when one looks at the logistics of team teaching online. And that is where the next step, that is certain norms in terms of what kind of cases can be chosen, how one would be dealing with interruptions from another faculty or student, etc., or interjections or interventions from any of them as part of the discussion of a case. All that would be coming in as a norm. And then once with some initial trial and error, it's possible that a faculty team can perform quite well in terms of team teaching a case online. This actually represents a typical way of trying to understand the team dynamics, and it's true also with respect to team teaching a case online. Now, what are the ways in which the members in the team can participate in the whole team teaching exercise of a case online? Number one, there could be just observation from another faculty. A faculty takes lead and does the case discussion. That's one way in which the role or responsibility of the two faculty members can be split. The second way in which it can happen is that if there are 2 or 3 faculty members, there is one faculty member who takes the lead, but the other one assists, in the sense that whenever the leading faculty member, in the sense that the faculty member who takes the lead in the team to teach the case online, if he asks for the other faculty member to pitch in during the case discussion, then it is an assist mode or it is more of a support when required. Other interesting ways in which one can look at faculty participation as part of team teaching online could be parallel or alternate ways of teaching the same set of students the same case. What this would mean is that one can take turns to look at subsections of the case discussion or the case, or a case A can be taught by one faculty member and the case B will be taught by another faculty member, and there can be interchange of that in the next session or a next class, so that gives an understanding of how the class went when one did it parallelly or alternate between the either different classes or different subsections of the case. But the ideal form of faculty team teaching a case online is when both or all the faculty who are involved in the team teaching process of a case online, they spontaneously come in terms of discussing the case in the class. Now, when that happens so very effortlessly and seamlessly as part of the case discussion, it's the perfect synchrony that one is expecting when you're looking at team teaching a case online. Now, I want to bring in Vijaya to tell us about what should one do when one is trying to team teach online with respect to the cases that one chooses. Over to Vijaya.
Thank you, Shiv. We as case writers encounter a lot of cases, and some of us come from one discipline and some of us come from multiple disciplines. So I'm sure that you have authored or co-authored several different types of cases. And as you know, interdisciplinary cases, I think today are quite welcome, simply because we live in this complex world. And if you're bringing the context of the world into the case, then definitely interdisciplinary cases are going to be very appropriate. However, there are courses like strategy that definitely would need interdisciplinary cases. Again, here, I think the opportunity is rich, especially when you're teaching interdisciplinary cases, to have a colleague who can work with you and complement your skills and bring in richness to the discussion. But of course, interdisciplinary cases are not required in all disciplines. And if you predominantly are using single discipline cases, they are easy to manage as well as may work with your comfort level. But one thing that we've already talked briefly about is the length. What would be appropriate for your class? And of course, this will depend on many factors, which we will discuss later, definitely on the number of students, the type of class, as well as the medium, what kind of instruction you're going for. And those of you who are case writers and case teachers already know that in an online environment, long cases are least preferred, whereas medium to short cases are the most preferred ones, not only from the teacher's faculty members' point of view, but also from the students' point of view. We've noticed that their attention spans are shorter. So one of the challenges that we have as faculty is how do we engage students, which we will discuss a little more in depth later. But my friend and co-panelist here, Dave, has actually done a lot of cases, or a few very popular cases in new genres. And so he will be talking a little bit about that. I will invite him to talk a little bit about that. But we are all familiar with writing and using traditional cases, whether they are from the Harvard Business School method or our own CRJ cases. But again, the digital landscape has enabled us to bring materials like the YouTube materials and video clips without actually incurring a lot of extra cost. So may I invite Deb here to talk about the different types of genres, but just briefly, Shiv, before we talk about what goes into mentioning that.
Over to Dave.
We can go to the next slide. I'll talk about this because before the class, when you are co-planning, there are so many things that are vital that you have to do. And one of the things that is so important is mapping the cases. That is, the content is so important. Delivery is important, but at the same time, content is so important. And that's what's been emphasized by Vi. And now I would like to take it further from where she left. And she had asked for different kind of formats. And I'm going to talk about that. And it all falls in this mapping of cases. So this is something team has to do together. They have to do it together. And that is how there can be the ownership also of the case. If one person does it and other is uninvolved, that is not an ideal situation. So in true spirit of the team, they have to choose the cases together, map it to the course, to the sessions, and for why they are taking it as a team. So all those things have to be very clear. And now coming to this content part, you have to see what kind of cases you are taking to the class. How many of them are long cases? How many of them are short cases? How many of them are medium cases? Of course, the shorter and medium cases are more preferred because it is easier for, it takes lesser amount of time for the students as well as the instructor to process. But there is many a time there is a legitimate need for you to take the longer cases as well. So how do you go about it? So here, Vi was talking about the newer formats that I have used. So there are other authors also who have tried out different formats like other than the shorter cases, which are like say 5 pages or 7 pages or even 2 pages. There have been some video cases which have come up. We have at IBS we have come up with some comic book cases, that is graphic novel cases, which went on to be quite popular. And I think this is the best time for more and more educators to adopt those. And but instructors have been somewhat slow in taking up those newer format cases. Like just the other day, like I'm not talking about even a week back, there was one professor who wrote to me saying that she had written a graphic novel case, and you know there are no takers for that from a journal. So I can very well understand a reviewer saying that you know it can lead to trivializing of a management situation. But maybe we should be more open-minded about such things and you know look at this format as for what they can do, what kind of rigor is built up in the teaching note, and that's how you know we should be open-minded about newer formats like video formats and graphic novel formats. But at the same time, the value of the regular case, that is a 15 to 20 page case also, is never gone, because you need them, because you know you can drive very good learning from them. You have been doing it for years, and now all you have to do is maybe adapt it to a online mode and while teaching it in a team setting. But particularly some decision that you may need to make is which cases you should put in the synchronous mode and which you can put in the asynchronous mode. Maybe some of those bigger cases, longer cases, which are maybe coming up in some compartments, can be discussed in stages, can be even put up in the asynchronous mode. And maybe for 2 or 3 cases also, which are similar, you can sometimes come together in the synchronous mode and, you know, have a live session on them. Once you have these cases ready, the next thing you have to think about is the discussion, how you are going to run the discussion. And for that, we at our school, ICFI Business School, we have teachers coming together to discuss the cases before they are taken to the class. So that was done in the physical mode. So now Even in the online mode also, teams can come together, whether it is through the asynchronous mode or in the live mode, or a combination of both. Teachers can come together and they can plan the cases and how they are going to take it to the class, how they are going to run the discussion, what can be the opening question, what can be the discussion questions. So all those can be discussed threadbare before you go to the class, and this leads to a more standardized delivery in the classroom. And also they should agree on the map, how the thing will go. Like, you always have to have your plan on what will be the discussion posture, what comes after what. So that brief plan has to be there. Of course, things may change in the actual situation, but it has to be there. Then what is the division of labor? Who will do what? Who will start the discussion? Who will lead with the other discussion questions? Who would do the observing? And when? So all those things can be done. What roles one will take up? So all those can be discussed beforehand and planned. So you can also anticipate scenarios, what can go wrong, what direction a discussion can take place. So you should have your plan A, B, C, D. You cannot be more prepared at any point of time. So how you are going to evaluate, who has the responsibility of doing that. So all those things can be done. And before class, that development of the repo is so important, because that is what will get you through. So that repo is absolutely essential. We have always been talking about an instructor having a very good repo with the students. So here you have to have that repo with the other members of your team, that is the other instructors, and that is crucial for your success in the class later.
Thanks, Dave. What we will do now is to look at the next step in the process of trying to teach online, a team teach online a case, and that is co-instructing. So this is where the rubber meets the road, in the sense that all the planning that we talked about just now, how does it actually get implemented when you are trying to look at team teaching a case online? Now, at this stage, let me invite Vijaya to talk about what are the various modes that are possible.
Thank you, Shiv. I hope that you're enjoying our conversation. And this slide actually mirrors the online teaching. And I've used the same words because it does reflect the spirit. And you all can see that some of you who are already teaching online can use the same formats as you're doing with online, as in you would do for case teaching. So let me start with my favorite, which is the synchronous method, where, of course, all students and faculty members are expected to sign in and log in to whatever platform you're using. I think the most popular one right now is Zoom, but there are other platforms. And even though we're not in the same classroom, if done well, it almost has the feel of being in the same classroom. And yet, this is my favorite because it allows me to build rapport with my students. I can see them, they can see me, and I can invite them as I would. I typically ask them, set the rules up front and say everybody has to be muted and wait for their turn. Or I would say that you will not have audio privileges, but you need to keep your video on, and we will conduct the discussion through the chat box. And I will tell you the advantage of that later on. And then let me go to the polar opposite, which is asynchronous. And this is, as you have heard from my friends, both Dave and Shiv, this is most conducive when you have large classes. So it adapts really well to scale. However, your institution, your college may be setting up classes in one way or the other. And most of the times it can be asynchronous, where the materials is online. You create assignments that are submitted online. You respond to them, you give them feedback, as well as in terms of case discussion, you may have discussion threads running that are time sensitive, where you have your students submit comments, respond to questions that you have assigned, and then you also chime in there and moderate the discussion. Of course, as you can see, some of you, or from your own personal experience, this takes an enormous amount of time. Over 6 years ago, when I was adventurous, and the first time I taught this a class, an online class, of course, as you know, I love to teach with cases. There is not a single class that I would teach without cases. And luckily, what happened was I was teaching this one class because I had a research agenda to do. And the class, was not large, but I thought, okay, let me dive into this online teaching, and I'll start with asynchronous and see how it goes. Well, as you can imagine, even though I had only 12 students in that class, it took up my entire time to the point that I did not have any time left for actually research. However, the good part of that is I started getting emails. You can say, question that statement, whether it was good or not. I started getting emails from students saying that this is the best online class we have taken or I have taken. Can I come meet you in person? And I would say, no, this is an online asynchronous class. I'm not on campus, and so I don't have a way to meet you. But they kept on sending, and I caved in finally. And I said, okay, we will have an in-class exam. So you get to meet me. But, in an asynchronous environment, you know what I'm saying, you don't have the flexibility of doing that, especially when you have, a very large class in the hundreds or 50 students. That is impossible. But you can achieve a lot of discussion as well, depending on the way it is set up and your preference, etc. But then there is also a hybrid type of class where you can have some combination, and I've tested this out as well, where I would meet students on campus on specific dates, and we would have discussions, whether it would be a theory or case discussions, depending on whatever your preference is, and then have materials online. And I've done this in MBA and executive MBA classes as well. And this works really well. So, we have multiple methods. So this is what I wanted to talk about. Shiv?
Could you just continue on, trying to understand what is meant by most synchronized to the least synchronized modes?
Well, thank you, Shiv, for that question, because it just blends in well to what I've already mentioned, is that depending on how you plan the class, you plan the case discussion, as well as whether the team teaching is going to be sequential, simultaneous in terms of your colleagues coming in. That's where the synchronicity comes in. And you could have a combination of, I'm taking, of course, the extremes of more synchronized to least synchronized formats, as we've discussed before, as well as we're going to discuss a little more in terms of how that can be. And I'm going to be using metaphors. So, Shiv?
Yes.
So here is the metaphor that is my favorite, where and you all can relate to this one, where the first model is highly synchronized and simultaneous, like in a ballroom dance, right? You're together in the same room, metaphorically, again, if you're online, same time. And it is highly synchronized and highly coordinated if it needs to be a good dance, right? I think that all our teaching is actually like a performance that we have. We have back-end preparation, but especially in online classes where you have a synchronous format where students and teachers log in at the same time, at a set amount of time, at a set date, then it has to be a performance. And it requires, as you've seen, a lot of preparation as well as coordination for a perfect performance on that day and a perfect discussion. And I think it is very, very engaging to students as well to have this kind of synchronicity. But then on the polar end is my favorite metaphor of the Indian dance performance, Bharatanatyam here, where you see you could have multiple actors or a single actors. It could be a solo performance or a sequential performance. But again, it is solo. You don't need the synchronicity like you need in a ballet performance. But yet, of course, it requires a lot of planning and the performance has to be impeccable. And the result is the same. However, we are seeing only one person here at a time on the screen. Shiv?
Yeah. The other way to look at teaching in the online mode, in a team teaching kind of an environment, is to think of different forms in which you can look at either discussion, debate, trials, or public hearing kind of a setting. Because this is possible in an online setting, you can have different sets of, different faculty, different sets of students trying to talk for or against, like in a debate. The discussion mode will be similar to what we see in the online context. But we can also have different sets of people, the students, undergoing some form of a trial, because there is a faculty member who is questioning the assumptions or the various options or the decisions that are being taken by them as part of the case discussion. Or it could be like a public hearing in the sense that somebody would present and there are other students or faculty who can raise issues as part of the discussion. Now, because it is online and if it is in the synchronous mode, this is something that is possible. But the same things can also be replicated in the asynchronous mode, because that's also another way in which we can generate a lot of discussion, debate, trial, as well as public hearing, even though it may be in the asynchronous mode. The whole idea behind looking at different kinds of instructional methods in team teaching a case online is that can we bring in different perspectives so that at the end of the team teaching exercise, both the faculty as well as students go home richer with different thoughts about what the case decision was about. There are some very practical issues I thought I will highlight when you are looking at team teaching online. These relate mainly to students because these are the primary stakeholders when you are trying to look at team teaching a case online. There are different kinds of students. If there are first time students who are undergoing cases as a instructional method, it would be better if you can use some case witness, which would mean using small simple cases which can only per discussion rather than have lot of analysis. Whereas in the case of seasoned case discussion teams of students, it's possible to have more elaborate cases. And there is also an issue with regard to teams that are formed among students for discussing cases, similar to what the faculty may face in terms of team teaching online. This is also something that we need to look at very carefully when we are talking about student issues. The second most pertinent aspect in terms of team teaching cases online is connectivity. I think while in many of the developed countries, internet speeds are not so much of an issue, but if we have a global set of faculty teaching globally students located in different parts of the world, then there could be a very low speed internet and there could be a lot of latency. There could be issues in terms of even connecting to video and audio, that is an issue that one would have to contend with. And similarly, where is it that video is required? Where is it that only audio is required? Where is it that both are required, and can the student actually afford to put on video as well as audio on as part of participation in a discussion, especially when you are looking at two faculty asking questions, different contexts, etc. Will one be able to track what is it that's happening? It's an issue that the student would face, especially if the connectivity is a problem for them. This is something that we have to contend with. And especially in the Indian context, I have observed, based on the online teaching experience right now that we are going through, that there are a lot of students who go, kind of access, all the materials, even video, etc., through their mobile. So the what we call it the screen real estate is something that is very small, that it's very difficult for them to actually look at what is happening when you have large classes and when we have team teaching kind of a context for us. So these are some of the things I thought, based on my experience and trying to look at from a student's perspective. What is it that the students would face when we are looking at team teaching a case online? Now let me ask Vijaya. In terms of engaging students online, what do you think are some of the issues that we need to consider when we are team teaching a case online? Over to you.
Thank you, Shiv. Well, as you all know, it is challenging in this digital environment. Of course, we have the student mix, age, diversity, cross-cultural backgrounds and country settings, etc., and also different access to technology. So I think for us professors in colleges, universities, we don't have much of a feedback on their backgrounds, but sometimes you can request that those backgrounds, that students can upload a brief background about themselves, and so understand that. But again, this is only possible if the class size is small. And if you have a very large class, it is almost impossible to get to know the backgrounds of everyone. And also learning styles. Over the years, I have noticed that we all have different learning styles, and also students. Some prefer just audio material, so they're happy to listen to the professor. Some, want to complement that with something to read and also see, like slides. So, and some, want more engaging content, such as in video content. So we have to understand what is the mix of content that you would actually use, because there are so many different types of content and also different learning styles and backgrounds. And I play it safe by having multiple media content. Definitely the audio part is there, the presence in the classroom, especially when it is a synchronous one, and then assignments for those who need more time to digest, cannot respond on the spur of the moment, as well as some engaging content, in terms of any video materials. We are in the golden age where there is a lot of YouTube content on the companies that we talk about. So at some point, you can introduce brief video clips or require them to look at certain video clips before they come to class. And my favorite, again, is when I'm teaching a case that involves multiple country contexts, then, I tend to look for a video clip that not only represents the lifestyle in that particular country, which vividly demonstrates, the surrounding environments and very clearly shows what is the kind of environment that these people that we talk about in the case study are surrounded with, but also bring multiple contexts as well. It could be the company context, the industry context. And so something that used to be very expensive and accessible only if you had a grant, a large grant, today can be done with very little money, because now we've actually been surrounded in an online environment, unfortunately, due to COVID. However, I think this is a great, important thing to be considering, even when we come out of this pandemic soon. Shiv?
So let me now check with Dave. What should typically faculty who are team teaching consider when they're looking at the logistics in class?
So many things have already been covered about how to co-instruct while as a team in online format while teaching on the online mode. Now these are some of the things that I would just like to add to. Like we have talked about the importance of the planning part, and now this is the time to put that plan into action. And it can be and each of those elements is so crucial, like something as small as the opening. Vai was just talking about how you can start with a video clip. Sometimes the format itself can be a icebreaker, like when we have talked about video cases or graphic novel case, where the novelty itself, can be such a nice icebreaker. Otherwise, also, it all depends upon the imagination of the instructor. And here we are not talking about one instructor, we are talking about two or more instructors. So, something nice can be worked out, and who is going to be responsible for that? So once you have that icebreaker, you have this set of discussion questions to elicit class participation. Things like who is going to be delivering and who is going to be, you can take turns in delivering and turns in observing. When you are doing alone as an instructor, when you are taking the class, you are doing both the things. Delivering at some point of time, at the same time, all the time you are observing, because you have to also evaluate the class participation. So here you can take turns, you can be more relaxed, and you can see that as a team you are able to capture everything. If some people are not being participative enough, the other person can always do some cold calling without even the other instructor not realizing. And the cold call itself can be so much less stressful in the online mode. And you can also set up role plays. You can ask some people, even with a more private message, to participate, say something, or even take up a particular stance. So it all depends upon the imagination of the instructors. And multiple perspectives can be brought in. Some alternate view can come in. If the participants themselves are not coming up with alternative view, one of the instructors can take it upon himself or herself, to play the devil's advocate and bring in some alternative perspective, even question some of the common responses that are coming in, make the whole class see the other side of the coin. And as we have talked about, this is one of the ways you can demonstrate collaboration to the whole class. How you are in a very synchronized way, you are teaching the class between the instructors I'm talking about. And then, this prior planning is so much important here, and that brings around the spontaneity in the class. Things can go very different than what you have planned, but because you have planned and you had your plan A, B, C, D, etc., even if things go haywire, if it goes in other directions also, there will be that semblance of, that spontaneity will be there. So that would be visible to others. So that is where well-planned session can be also very well implemented. So you can always look at improvising, because there are two people at least who are thinking on how to improvise, what is going wrong, what is digressing, how we are going to bring back the discussion on track. there can be issues like technical issues, technology related issues. Sometimes there may be this power outs. Sometimes there may be this lagging because of different devices in different places. So in such cases, what do you do? If suddenly one of the instructor goes off because of a power cut, how do the other person step in and do? That can be done only when they know the plan, how the discussion is supposed to go. Only when they know the plan well, they know the map well, they can do that. And of course, there are the benefits for evaluation, which we have a full section to discuss on. Then in the synchronous mode, there can be also further division of labor where, instructors can come in at different times of the day. Because if you are going to teach a global audience and people may be logging in at different times, participants may be logging in at different times from different time zones. So what the instructors can also take it upon themselves. If there are 2 or more instructors, they can make sure that at least one of them is there to drive the discussion, to put in some questions and things like that. So much can be possible. It all depends upon the imagination. And I'm sure if it is well planned, it can also be very well implemented.
Thanks, Professor Dev. I think this is the right time to look at the last step in terms of what we are going to do in teaching a case online. Is that this is not a situation where we are just only trying to discuss a case. A case that we are talking of here is going to be team talk, number one. It's a case as part of the course, number two. And number three, since it is part of a course, there is obviously a requirement of assessment of the case, a case discussion of the students who are part of the case discussion. So, if there are 2 or more faculty members who are involved in team teaching a case online, also are involved in assessing what's happening in terms of the case discussion. And if we go by Harvard Business School kind of an approach, where almost 50% of whatever is part of assessment is for class participation, then it becomes important to also understand exactly how do we do co-assessment when teaching team teaching a case online. Now, one of the aspects I think is very important to understand when you are looking at assessment is that there are different types of assessment. There is formative assessment, there is summative assessment, formative assessment, which is ongoing as part of the course. Summative assessment would come in at the end in terms of understanding whether the entire course has been understood well by the students. There is also assessment with respect to program learning objectives, which one needs to map with the cases that are used, the course, and therefore whether those learning objectives have been achieved or not. So there are multiple reasons why we do assessment, and assessment is linked with multiple aspects. Now, given this, in an online team teaching of a case kind of a context, what do we do? What would be the type of assessment? Would it be done in class? Or having taught a case, would there be an exam which is online, offline? These are multiple questions that one needs to be very clear about in terms of looking at assessment. Because while online team teaching cases is just probably an instructional mode, it also complicates assessment because we are not very sure, depending upon what's happening with respect to participation, how do we assess the students. Therefore, here, responsibility in terms of, for example, if it is more on class participation, who will do an assessment of who is bringing in good points, who is participating during the class, after the class, if it is, asynchronous, what happens in terms of discussion fora where students provide a lot of inputs, like what Vijaya was talking about, that if you, team teach it asynchronously, if there is a team of faculty members, who is going to look at what is being, written about in terms of case analysis, etc. These are kinds of issues that will crop up with respect to assessment, and therefore the responsibility on who will do what with respect to assessment, whether it is formative or summative, or with respect to PLO, which we need to report, let's say, for example, ACSB accreditation, etc., or if it is in class and in an examination, who is going to do what in terms of assessment. This is something that is very important to be, decided with respect to responsibility. Now, I would ask, Vijaya to tell us about, what would one do with regard to assessing participation in an online team case teaching?
Thank you, Shiv.
Yes.
So, yeah, this is, I think, one of the most challenging but most appropriately selected ones that needs to be used. So, there should be some thought. Of course, written assignments. They could be long assignments, for example. In my undergraduate strategy class, until recently, we had decided that we will have a number of written assignments for students. Then, of course, that involves a lot of grading. And then you can also do quizzes, very brief quizzes, 5-minute, 10-minute, 15-minute quizzes. I love doing this right before class. And I tell them it's an open book, open case, but I also tell them that unless they've read the case and thought about some of the issues, and typically my cases also have financial information, and that they've integrated that financial information, and of course they should have done the analysis before, integrating that information, that they would not do well in the quiz, even though it is open book, open case. But it actually puts students on alert and also gives you a sense of how much preparation is going, how much, therefore, you need to actually help them understand, as well as what are some things that you need to emphasize during the discussion, or send out an email saying that those of you who have not understood, looks like there are quite a few of you, I'm happy to help you. So there are a lot of different interventions that you could do, not only with written assignments, but very surprisingly through the 10 to 15-minute quizzes. Again, it depends on the time that you have. I typically teach courses that are about an hour and 50 minutes, that 110 minutes. But I know if you're teaching a class that is only 60 minutes, having a quiz online in class before the case discussion could be challenging. So, but those are just examples. But then you also know that in the online functions, and I'm talking about this more from a synchronous method than an asynchronous format, and we can go into this a little bit later, but already my friend Shiv and Dave have covered those. That there are polls during the discussion. And it is really nice to be able to see what actually is the view. For example, should the company go ahead and make this acquisition or not, right? A quick poll at the beginning of class gives me a sense of what students are thinking, because now if I'm administering a quiz right before the case discussion, I don't have an idea about what students' views are. So a quick poll actually serves two purposes, as a warm-up question, as well as for me to see where students are and also give them participation points. So I kind of have polls throughout the case discussion just to see, whether students are engaged, they're listening, or they're multitasking. Of course, who doesn't multitask, right? So we need to think about that dynamic as to how it plays out. and who is present and who is not. Because many times I notice that even when you ask students that their video has to be on, they will put on a picture and then disappear. And I will, in a moment, when I get to the chat box, share with you some really interesting examples there. But again, as both Shiv and Dave have pointed out, you could use the breakout room function, very easily, and assign them a question to discuss, and also include presentations. And some of you may already know there is the whiteboard function. So as things are evolving, you can actually have some of the things captured in, as you would do in a face-to-face environment, where you would write on the board to show certain things or to bring viewpoints together, etc. So technology is wonderful, and I'm sure that that there is a lot of help from your own technology teams in your universities and colleges. Now, my favorite thing to use is the chat box. Even if I have a very small class, something like 15 students or 30 students, which now I would think that's a larger class, but that's become the standard norm here at my university, University of Denver, approximately 30 students in a classroom environment. So I essentially, just as I mentioned to you very early in this symposium, is that I lay down the ground rules, say, well, you are all muted. You will not get a chance to express your opinion. Do not unmute yourself, because that is not going to play out well. We want only one person talking at the same time. However, remember that your participation grade is very important. So the best way to do it is through the chat box. So I will type in a question as well as orally mention it and have students explain to me in the chat box. This tells you very clearly from the answers not only who is physically present and who is intellectually and emotionally present as well, and also their preparation, because you will sometimes see a yes or no, very brief kind of deals, even when in a question they need to answer more than a yes and no. So I will correct them and say a yes and no doesn't give you much participation. And also, same as above, I had an instance very early when I was teaching, when I was testing out the online formats, that there would be these cute, quick signs, and I would very genuinely go into a surprise and say, hey, I don't understand what you're saying, even though the picture looks very cute here. Tell me what it is. And some of them would laugh and say, that is same as above. I said, well, guess what? Same as above means that I want to just clarify, does not earn your participation grade. So you need to really type in, because at the end of the day, I am going to download this chat box. And by the way, when you are recording a presentation on Zoom, it will automatically send you the chat box saved chat text to you, and you can look at that. But I sometimes also, for the sake of being very careful and making sure that I have the chat box before I sign off, I actually copy and paste the chat box, and there it gives me immense information that I can use to be objective in terms of assigning participation. Shiv?
That's wonderful, Vijaya. I think you have shared your experience in terms of teaching a case and what really happens when you're looking at online case teaching. And those issues would probably, I think, magnify when you're looking at in teaching a case online. After the class, what is it that one does is something that's very important. And now I request Dave to highlight on this aspect, that once the class is over, what are the kinds of aspects that we need to kind of look at carefully in a team teaching context when you're looking at discussing a case online. Yeah.
Yes, if so many important insights have come up already about assessing and evaluation. Now we all know how important evaluation is in the during the class also. So much of those things would be happening during the class or even in an asynchronous mode. The whole period. But after the class, there are certain things that can happen when you get together, when the instructors get together, and as we said earlier, that one of the benefits is of having two heads rather than one, and this is one area where this can be really beneficial, because this issue of grading can be a great source of heartburn for a lot of people, particularly for the participants who are graded, and sometimes it also has repercussions for the instructor as well, because in certain places we have also seen in certain settings when this also reflects in your own feedback that comes from the students, and some of younger instructors, and particularly the less informed, some of them misinformed, you can say, they sometimes take this very seriously. They try to play the grades of the students so that they can get a better feedback themselves and a better grade for themselves in the class. So when there are two heads coming together, two or more heads, and deciding on the evaluation, it can be so much better. It can be so much less biased, and even more important than being less biased, it is the perception of being less biased, because there are more than one person involved. So that itself can be very beneficial. Then you can also give so much better feedback to the participants, to the students, because there are two or more people observing the class, and both in terms of quantitative as well as qualitative inputs that have come from the participants, because sometimes one person may miss something, particularly if it is a multi interdisciplinary class, something that is very pertinent may be missed by one instructor. And here somebody may say, okay, this is one student who did not participate much, and the other instructor can come in saying that he participated twice but brought in very good value to the class with his insights. So in this way it can be so much better, and you can also give very good feedback to the participants, and you can take turns in giving feedback, whether collectively or individually. And then introspection is something I always believe in for any class, not just online class, but also for offline classes. So every time you come out of the class as an instructor, you need to introspect about what went well, what did not went well, what went your way as per plan, what did not go your way, how other classes were better, or in what way this participation was better than other classes, and how you can leverage this for your next class. Now, this is where after doing that individual introspection, instructors can share notes, and this can lead to a lot of value. Also, you can update the teaching plans, you can update the teaching notes which you have been using for a case which you might have written yourself, or even otherwise your notes. I always recommend that even if you are using some other people's cases also, you should always have your own teaching notes for teaching that case. And this can also give so much inputs for your planning for the next session. And that's how the cycle continues.
Thanks, Dave, for giving a very comprehensive idea about what one should do after the class. What we covered in this entire session is about basically what is meant by team teaching a case online. What are the various aspects that one needs to consider, and what could be the process starting from co-planning, co-instructing, and then co-assessing the case when we are looking at team teaching. Now, I would ask my friends Dave and Vijaya to give their concluding remarks before we close this session. Thank you.
This has been such a nice experience for me when we were planning this symposium, and thanks to Shiv for asking me to be a part of it. and there was so much learning. It was such a good learning experience talking to him as well as Bhai. And when we were planning this symposium ourselves, there were so many learnings, and we really learn from each other's perspectives, because we may be doing the same thing ourselves, but many things we were not doing. Maybe there are so many questions, because this online game has been such a big leveler. There are people like Vai who have been doing online teaching for years together. I have done with COVID-19 situation. Everyone has to do that. And when we are looking at team teaching, yes, I had some experience of team teaching earlier, but I didn't know how it would play out in the online mode. So we had our chances of trying out these newer formats, new team arrangements, and we all are learning. We are trying to learn every day, and this discussion really opened up my mind, and what I was not doing and I was stuck with, I could learn from the other two illustrious co-panelists here. And as I said, it's been a great learning for me, and I hope it is for the other co-panelists. And I also hope that it has been worthwhile for you as well. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dave, for those wonderful words. Now, Vijay.
Well, thank you, Shiv, and thank you, Dave, for inviting me to join you. And as you have expressed, I was absolutely thrilled and delighted with the opportunity to learn from you, and I have learned from you as well. And, I hope that we have demonstrated here how team teaching could go. Of course, we did not use a case study, but we had a lot of planning and discussions and the whole coordination and how we will actually conduct ourselves during this panel session was very important. So I hope, in addition to not only walking away with some tips about how you're going to do this, if you plan to do this in a synchronous way or asynchronous way, but definitely team teach a case study. I hope you have learned. We gave you a few interesting pointers to walk away with, but I have learned a lot, and thank you, Siv and Dave. And, I would invite you to send us any comments or questions and feedbacks that you may have. And thank you again for being with us.